These are the tales from South Florida for you, with your host, Bill Monty.
Welcome to Tales from South Florida, where we dig up the stories, secrets, and sunshine-soaked history of our little corner of the Sunshine State. I'm your host, Bill Monty. If this is your first time with us, welcome. We're so glad you're here. If you're a returning visitor, it's so nice to see you again. I do appreciate your support. Everyone, please remember, if you like our episode, hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening, and be sure to leave us a comment after the episode ends. Today, we're taking another talk down memory lane, just off the coast of Miami, to a sliver of land that's seen everything from pirates and presidents to porpoises and parrots. That's a lot of P's. I'm talking about Key Biscayne. Now, if you've ever taken that scenic drive across the Rickenbacker Causeway past the glittering waters of Biscayne Bay, you know there's something a little magical about Key Biscayne. It's peaceful, breezy, tucked away from the chaos of the mainland. But this quiet barrier island, it's been at the center of more than a few stories worth telling. So grab your sunglasses, maybe some sunscreen, and let's take a walk through the history of Key Biscayne. Now let's start at the southern tip. That's where you'll find the Cape Florida Lighthouse, standing tall since 1825, and honestly, it's probably the island's most iconic landmark. But it's more than just a pretty photo op. It has real historical weight. The lighthouse was originally built to guide ships through the dangerous Florida Reef. Back then, this area was treacherous for sailors. And in 1836, during the Second Seminole War, the lighthouse was attacked and partially destroyed by Seminole warriors. The lighthouse keeper and his assistant were trapped inside during the attack. One of them was killed, the other severely injured, but survived by hiding in the base of the tower until help arrived days later. Wild, right? By the way, I talked about that in a previous episode about the Cooley Massacre. I'll put a link in the show notes for you so you can go back and listen to it if you haven't heard it yet. The lighthouse was rebuilt later and has been restored beautifully. Today, you can climb all the way to the top if you're brave enough, strong enough, for one of the best views you can find anywhere in Miami-Dade County. Now let's fast forward to the 20th century and one of the more surprising chapters in Key Biscayne's history. You ready? Key Biscayne was once the tropical retreat of none other than President Richard Nixon. Now, if you're as old as I, this doesn't come as a shock to you. But yeah, Tricky Dick had a little compound right on the island. In fact, people used to call it the Winter White House. Nixon bought a home there in 1969, right next door to his friend and political supporter, B.B. Rebozo. And for a while, Nixon would retreat to Key Biscayne to unwind, host world leaders, or, let's be honest, escape the heat in D.C., literally and politically. He reportedly worked on parts of his State of the Union addresses here, and during the Watergate scandal, Nixon came here a lot. I do remember that. They always reported on the news when Tricky Dick was back in town. There's even a legend that some of the infamous tapes were reviewed or possibly even recorded while he was on Key Biscayne. That compound is gone now, replaced by condos, but locals still refer to the area near 500 Bay Lane as the Nixon Estate. Imagine living in the building now, knowing a U.S. president used to sunbathe in your backyard. I got to get that image out of my mind. But the presidential connection is only part of what gives the island its charm. Let's head north a little bit to Crandon Park. Longtime residents know where this is headed, because before it was a public park with stunning beaches and picnic areas, it was a zoo. And it was the only zoo in the South Florida area, at least on the East Coast. Yep, the Crandon Park Zoo opened in 1948, but here's the twist. It actually started with animals from a stranded circus. Legend has it that a small circus went bankrupt in Miami, and the animals were basically abandoned. The city took them in and decided, hey, let's make a zoo out of this. Sounds like a Matt Damon movie. It grew over the years into a full-blown attraction with lions, elephants, monkeys, the works. If you grew up in Miami before the 1980s, there's a good chance you remember school trips or family weekends spent at Crandon Park Zoo. I know I do. I don't remember a lot about it. We didn't go there a lot, but the few times I remember the train that they had. That was a lot of fun. And I remember that the animals were kept, sadly, in pretty small cages. I didn't think of it then, and it wouldn't ever fly now. But the way that they were confined, it might have been a little bit on the cruel side, but it was exciting for a little boy in the late 1960s. But in 1980, the zoo animals were moved to a larger, more modern Metro Zoo, now known as Zoo Miami. The old zoo in Crandon Park has since been converted into gardens and nature exhibits, but you can still find remnants of the animal enclosures if you know where to look. And speaking of animal attractions, how can we forget the Miami Seaquarium? And in some ways, no matter how hard we try. Located just before you hit Key Biscayne proper on the Rickenbacker Causeway, the Seaquarium opened in 1955 and was one of Florida's earliest marine parks. It's where Flipper, the dolphin who became a TV star in the 60s, lived. Well, we know there were several dolphins that were there. None of them were really named Flipper. I also talked about Flipper and the Miami Seaquarium in our very first episode in talking about Ocean World. And while it has been beloved by generations of visitors, the Seaquarium has also faced controversy in recent years, especially around the captivity of its most famous resident, Lolita the orca. Lolita, also known as Tokitai, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Lolita was captured in 1970 and lived in that horrible small tank in the Seaquarium for over 50 years. Advocates pushed for her release for decades, and in 2023, plans were finally announced to retire her to a sea sanctuary. Sadly, Lolita passed away before that could happen. Her story is still a major part of the island's legacy and a reminder of how our relationship with nature and animals has evolved. As of the recording of this in August 2025, the Seaquarium has been bought now by another company and is still operational, although the city of Miami is now trying to revoke its lease. All right, we covered lighthouses, presidents, zoos, dolphins, but what's Key Biscayne like today? Well, despite its rich history and proximity to downtown Miami, it's still a relatively quiet residential community. It still has that feel of a beach town in small ways, not like it used to. It's home to about 13,000 people, mostly families and retirees. There's a strong Cuban-American influence, great seafood, and one of the nicest stretches of beach in all of Florida. No, really. Bill Bagg's Cape Florida State Park has repeatedly been ranked among the top 10 beaches in the United States. Oh, and by the way, it's got one of the best bike paths around. Seriously, bring your bike, rent one, just do it. It runs the length of the island and you'll cruise past mangroves, iguanas, palm trees, and if you're lucky, maybe even a manatee. Although hopefully the manatee is not on a bike. Next time you're looking for a little escape, somewhere with a fascinating past, a laid-back island vibe, you might want to check out Key Biscayne. It's the place where history and nature meet, with a side of presidential drama and dolphin tricks, just for kicks. Thanks for joining me on another trip through time on Tales from South Florida. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you like the episode, please do us a favor and hit that follow or subscribe button, also the like, and if you can, leave a comment. Remember, you can always visit talesfromsouthflorida.com for past podcast audio episodes, links to our YouTube channels, our Spotify playlist, which I add to all the time, so if you haven't listened for a while, head on over. Listen to it again. There's some new songs on there for you. You can also support the show with a link there, or you can leave me a 90-second voicemail through a tool called SpeakPipe. I just want to thank you again for supporting Tales from South Florida as we are becoming the fastest-growing podcast about Florida in the Sunshine State. In our next episode, we're going to be visiting the Gilded Age. As you may know from some of our previous episodes where we've talked about some of the influential people who helped build Florida, just like the HBO show, we have some great Gilded Age stories to tell. And they'll be coming up in the next couple of episodes, so I hope you'll join us. Until then, my friends, remember, be kind whenever possible, because it's always possible. And now I know some of you are waiting for it. Here's the theme song.
Let's take a talk down memory lane, 'cause the stories around here are just insane. Pirates World, the Sporto and Wolfies do. Palm Beach to Key West, that's where we grew. These are the tales from South Florida for you. With your host, Bill Monty.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Does the news cycle make you feel like you're on a tilt-a-whirl of outrage? Feeling like your brain is a political piñata getting whacked 24/7? There's an antidote. Outrage Overload is the podcast where we hit the pause button on the outrage train. We dissect the headlines, peel back the layers of negativity, and explore the science behind why you keep wanting to throw your phone at the wall. Before you lose another brain cell to outrage fatigue, check out the Outrage Overload podcast at outrageoverload.net or wherever you get your podcasts.